Good evening, everyone. My name is Miss Reid. I'm the founder of DaaamnDaddy.com, where daddy issues drive discussion. This evening, I have the pleasure of joining with me Valerie Rivera of Val's Bites. She's a matchmaker and dating coach, and tonight we'll be discussing how daddy issues can affect your dating life. So if you have any questions for Val while we're talking, just raise your hand and we'll save your questions for the end. And why don't you tell us more about what you do, Val?
Well, like you mentioned, I'm a dating coach and I'm a certified matchmaker. On my platform, what I do is I try to offer advice in a positive light to both men and women who are looking for relationships. Also, ideas in relationships. I have a podcast that I post every Tuesday called Love Bits and Bites, and we kind of talk about the same thing. And we'll talk about this maybe later, but up and coming, I'm going back on online radio. And we do a segment on dating and relationships. So what I like to help people, I feel like, I don't know if some of you are Christian or whatever, but I feel like God gave me a gift to listen and to provide help, assistance, guidance, looking at the bigger picture to help people out. And I feel like I have a gift for that. So that's why I do what I do.
Okay. So I saw your post earlier today about certain and how certain dating habits need to break. So some including being too available, or the one that I really liked was being flaky. So I happened to be reading it while I was on the phone with my mom, and I'm like, oh yes, because if you can't communicate that you're not going to be available to keep whatever plans we had, you're not ready to date. Tell me why those things are pet peeves to you personally or in your dating industry.
Well, what's interesting is that the flakiness has a lot to do with my daddy issues. I was actually thinking about it when I was writing it because and when I was, let me just give you a little bit of a rundown. So I was raised in the military. My dad was in the Army. He was never around. And then he decided to try to be a civilian. And a lot of people find it really difficult to make that transition. And he did. So he decided to rejoin under the reserves. And at that time, I guess he just kept working. I don't really know the specifics of it, but then they ended up sending him off to Panama for, I don't know if you know about Project Panama, where they gave the Panama Canal back to Panama. So he was there for about 2 years. And at that point, he had an affair. And I think I was 13 years old, and he left my mom. So kind of like after that, he was very like sketchy. Like he would make promises and not keep them. So I associate the flakiness with how my father wasn't laid there. Like he would say he would do something, but he never did. Or like he would say he would call me, but he never did. So that really like deep down inside, like that's something that drives me crazy, because I just think it's just a repeat of what he did to me. And I think if it only takes like a couple seconds for somebody to say, hey, listen, I can't make it, especially through text message or like emojis. So I don't know if you speak an emoji, but like, to say I can't make it, that's it.
Consider it. I definitely.
Exactly. I'm running late. And there's a prompt on your phone that says I'm running late, or you can save it or whatever. So just be considerate of people's time, because people spend their time putting things to the side for other people. You should just do the same. Treat people the way you want to be treated,
I agree. I definitely agree. I've had that experience come up for me, where I also had to realize that it was more so a reflection of my relationship with my dad, saying he was going to do things and not having that follow through, or just saying he was going to come and then leaving me other places waiting. And it's like, okay, I could have been skating with my friends today. So I definitely understand, especially in today's day and time, with all of the technology. Call me, beat me, if you want to reach me, any of those things, you could let me know that you're unable to be there. You mentioned that your dad was in the military. Do you feel like before he was struggling to get back into civilian life, that you guys had a decent relationship in the beginning and the military kind of got in the way of that?
No, I don't have any like really fun I don't have any crazy memories of my dad. The only thing I remember is like he plays guitar and he sings, so I remember that part. Um, and other than that, like I just remember him being really, really strict. Like I don't. So we would like sometimes me and my sister would take off his like military boots after he came back from like reporting from base. So we would like, and they're like combat boots, so you like untie them and we would take them off and things like that. So we would basically like do things for him. So um, and when he was a civilian, he was just like really angry all the time. So I don't have a lot of fond memories. I have a few. I know that I'm very similar to him, and it's very strange because I never spend a lot of time with him.
I find that interesting as
Mm-hmm.
well. All the ways you can be similar to someone based on DNA and not really know them.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't shared this with anyone yet, but when I decided to reconnect with my biological father a few months ago, I asked him what he would like to be doing. He told me about the job he has, but I asked him what he would like to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
He said he wanted to be a counselor to try and help other young boys avoid incarceration because that's where he spent most of his life. And I was like, wow, like, you know, I spent all this time trying to be a guidance counselor only to find out that you want to be a counselor. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
Those similarities can be striking. It's like, wow, how do we have that in common? It's very odd.
Yep. I did operations for about 10 years and he does, and I'm good at like day-to-day stuff. And he does operations now. Like he works for a military contractor. So it's just strange. That's the, you know, similarities. Yeah.
So what types of daddy issues do you find that your clients have? Or let's rewind a bit, because I think, like you mentioned, that whole flakiness pet peeve can come from or derive from relationships with a flaky parent. So I think people hear daddy issues and dating, they automatically think about sexual promiscuity, but I think it really is about those small nuanced things that we rarely talk about that come from those childhood experiences. So could you give us maybe 3 types of insecurities or issues that show up in someone that you've worked with or even in yourself that might stem from their relationship with their dad?
I think the biggest one is abandonment issues. That's my big one. I think the second one would be, depending on the relationship you had with your father, was abusive, the overly apologetic, and then like, I think wanting to please people has to do a lot with abandonment too. So if you wanted to talk about third one, or like people who consistently need a male figure in their life. Like, for example, I think me and my sister were both very opposite sides of the spectrum. So I'm like abandonment. Like I didn't have a lot of long-term relationships prior to my husband because it was easier for me to push people away than to be in a relationship. My sister, on the other hand, all she has is like long-term relationships, and she can't be single for more than a month. So that is that's like she was trying to fill in the male role within her relationship. And she feels like uncomfortable when she doesn't have somebody filling that role for her. So that's kind of my experience. And I see a lot of abandonment problems, but I think abandonment's a lot harder than people think. A lot harder to overcome.
What are some ways that abandonment can manifest? Because I'm here with you 100%. Highly present and often overlooked.
Yep. Like I think even with my friends, like I would always think they would leave me for whatever reason. Like I did something wrong and they'd be mad at me, and then I'd be like, oh my gosh, don't leave, you're like my best friend. Or or like automatically, like if I knew I slept with somebody too soon, I would push them away, just like because I didn't want to deal with like the heartbreak or like investing in them too long. What else? I don't know. My husband swears like when I drink, like all I do is talk about my parents, because it goes twofold. My mom, I don't have a good relationship with my mom either. So it's more like I felt alone, and then everybody like left me. So I just feel like people are going to just leave. So it's easier for me to like be strong and not even think about it than to invest myself into a relationship.
No, I definitely can relate to that experience. I think my mom and I have a decent relationship now,
Mm-hmm.
but there are some times where I have to remind her, like, hey, when you do these things, it makes me feel like I felt at this age when these things occurred. So I can definitely understand how it's hard for women to parent alone. So when the father is absent and the mom feels like she's doing overtime,
Mm-hmm.
it definitely puts a strain on a lot of relationships. I think in the media we have all these glorified images of single mothers doing the most, but sometimes it's not like that. That's not how it feels for the child when that parent is doing the most, because it kind of puts the mom in a position to be bipolar. Like you have to be disciplinarian and nurturer.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that you don't do those things when the other parent is present, but sometimes there's a better balance and shift in power there when there's two people.
Yeah, no, I agree. My mom basically like clocked out when I was like 14. So I took on a role of like trying to take care of my sister, who's only 2 years younger than me, for like a long time. And I would get her out of like, we were both in high school. So like getting hickeys on her neck, or like trying to break out of, trying to sneak out of the house, and like, hooking up with the neighbors and things like that. Like I was the one saying, you need to stay here or else I'm not going to let you go here or whatever. I'm not going to pick you up. I'm not going to drive you to school, something like that. So I ended up having to take on that role. And then I left to college, and then shit just hit the fan. But
you became the parent
yeah,
primarily in that time. And you know what? My mom likes to call that a timeout, an adult says that about other parents and sometimes about herself. I'm on an adult timeout when people check out of parenting. And I think that might be a result of going through a divorce. I don't know if you signed up to parent with someone in a partnership and you wind up having to do it alone. Some people aren't ready for the consequences of that, and that's unfortunate that fell on your shoulders. So back to dating.
Yeah.
What do you become a matchmaker, and how do you become a certified matchmaker?
I took a course. And I got certified. That's kind of like the wheelhouse. But I think what made me do it is that, like I said, like I like putting people together. Like I like the idea of like people falling in love, because like it's a good feeling when you find somebody that you can really like relate to and have a sincere relationship with. Because I think towards my late 20s, that's what I really wanted. And then I think the first time I actually matched somebody, it's a funny story. I went on a date with somebody, and it totally we did not connect on any level whatsoever. He's attractive, and that was the extent of it. So we actually sat like this far apart from each other all the time. So we stayed friends because I have the tendency to just like be super friendly with everybody. And I think one time we were hanging out with a bunch of friends, and I was like, so what kind of girl are you looking for? And he told me exactly who it was. And I was like, oh my goodness, I know who she is. So I introduced them, and they're still together. I think it's been like 6 years, and they have a son. So that was like the first time I did it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this feels really good. This is awesome. So then I did it again with another couple. And I was like, you know what? I just want to get like something under my belt to show that I'm certified or have some sort of like authority in the matter. So I looked for certification online. I did the course. I passed the course. And now I'm just working on my pool of people. So I'm just trying to, in the Orlando, Florida area, because I can't do long distance.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I actually watched a morning show where one of the hosts is the only one who's not married. So there's 4 women. The 3 of them are married and 1 is not. And they setting her up on dates this week. One matchmaker matched her with one person, and the other matchmaker matched her with someone else the next day. And I think that's interesting because I'm listening to you, and what I found interesting about that scenario was both matchmakers took a different approach. You said kind of listened to him, and you were like, oh my goodness, I know this person in my head. And that's kind of how the first matchmaker, who was a man, set her up. The second person had her take like a 300 question quiz. what types of ways do you build your pool, and how do you go about seeking a match for them?
Well, I do if I don't know you, like I don't know you as a person, then I would do the questionnaire route. What I like to do is like to go on 16 personalities and have them take the test there, and also do the question just to get like a feel, because when you don't know somebody, you don't know who they're attracted to. I mean, you know, you could be like a tall and skinny guy, but you like chubby chicks, you know what I mean? So I don't know that from looking at somebody. So those are the kinds of things that I would need to know. And then I would also like to meet them so I can feel them out a little bit. When two people are vibing, like you can totally tell if their personalities will mesh. And a lot of the times when personalities don't mesh, it's either because it's probably because the timing is wrong. Me and my co-hosts on the podcast, we like to talk about like timing and chemistry. Like you can have the best chemistry, but if the timing is wrong, like you just got out of a relationship, you're not ready for it, then it's not going to work out. Maybe try it 4 years down the line if you guys are still kind of the same people and want the same things, you know? So that's really important too.
That's interesting because I actually said that to someone on my live stream on Mondays.
Mm-hmm.
Mondays with Miss Reid with my audience, and I was saying to them that someone that I had been seeing, I felt like we were not ever feeling the same way about each other at the same time. And it could be like a throughout the week thing, not necessarily over long periods of time, but like maybe Monday, I really want to share myself with them, and they had something happen at work and they're not open to it. And they go home and they realize like, wow, I was really a jerk, you know, and then they want to be open and affectionate with me on Tuesday. And I'm like, no, you weren't feeling me yesterday. I'm not feeling you. So it was consistent. The timing was kind of off. And then I think that what you shared makes a difference, because when we met, I hadn't been in a relationship for 2 years, you know, 2 years and some change, and it had not been that long for them. So they didn't have that same recovery time to get back to being themselves. Right. I had. So here it was like, I'm ready. And like, I like you, but I kind of want to be by myself for a little while. So I definitely understand that. How do you normally go about suggesting people take that time, or saying to them, hey, I think you guys have great chemistry, but now the timing isn't right? Because that kind of sounds cliche. Oh, the timing is wrong. As someone who does this professionally, how do you go about saying that to people?
Well, I mean, I'm very straightforward. Like, I don't really sugarcoat much. I just tell them, hey, listen, it's not a good time to date this particular person. They're not ready. They're not psychologically, they're not emotionally ready for you. And you're just going to jump through hurdles to get to where you want to go. I've experienced the same thing myself. When me and my husband first met, we both got out of long-term relationships. I was previously engaged to somebody else. And then he came out of like a 5-year relationship, and we had met maybe 2 months after, and it wasn't like, the timing wasn't right. But then he hit me up 2 years later, and I had been single and partying and having a good time for 2 years. So I was ready.
I'm sorry, I mute you for a moment.
It's okay.
By accident. So the last thing I heard you say was about your husband. It had been 2 months.
Oh, right. We had gotten out of the relationship after 2 months. I mean, we had gotten to we just started dating. We weren't like in a relationship. We weren't committed to each other. And then 2 years later, after we kind of like broke things off because the timing was wrong, we got back together. He hit me up and we got back together. So that was 5 years ago.
So how long have you all been married?
A year.
1 year. You mentioned to me before we talked tonight that you considered yourself a serial dater.
Yeah.
And that your husband kind of helped you get through that. What kinds of things did he do to help you kind of get over that serial dating? How did he combat those abandonment issues you're talking about?
Well, he's Geo. He's really well read. So he did a lot of like self-help books and like Joel Osteen and Power of Now and The Secret and that kind of stuff. And he did a lot of like that kind of reading. And I did similar reading too. I just never really applied it like I should have. But he was different in that he would call me out, you know? So he'd be like, you need to stop doing that because you're dealing with, and he's like, you need a therapist or he needs to seek out some therapy because you're going through these abandonment issues. He's like, I can only help you as much as I can, but you need to address these issues before we consider having kids or something. So he's just like, he's very like direct. So there's no sugarcoating or me trying to like fool him or whatever, or me trying to like act like I'm not going through these things, because I tend to be like a very emotionally withdrawn. So when he points things out, I'm just like, oh, you're right again. He's great.
I think it's great that you all had the type of relationship where you could be open to him being direct.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sometimes we have those people who are direct with us and we're not ready to receive that. And that's also something, you know, with that post you shared today that you talked about. Maybe you're not ready to be in a relationship. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had someone apply to have you as their dating coach and you had to have that conversation with them that they're not ready?
Yeah, I have many times. But the problem is that I can give as much advice as, you know, I can throw advice out my ass if I wanted to, but people don't listen. Like my sister, for example, like I give her so much advice, it's ridiculous, but she doesn't listen like 75% of the time.
I think
so it's inevitable.
An ignore button.
Yeah. But there's people that I just feel like they're psychologically not ready and they push people away. I'm thinking about one person in particular, like she definitely has some sort of daddy issue and she pushes people away without knowing it, because she comes off very aggressive, like sexually aggressive right off the bat. So it could be because she associates love with sex, which is not good, because sex is supposed to be something very intimate. But when you lead with sex, you kind of like assume that's the way the relationship's going to be, and people don't take you seriously. So I just, you know, I try to guide her, and you know, maybe you shouldn't lead with sex. Maybe you should try holding his hand first, and becoming like physically, like doing PDA, like public displays of affection, as opposed to like, as opposed to like getting right. Don't escalate it so quickly. So
we talked about the abandonment issues, and
mm-hmm.
you know, you briefly covered how your sister likes to be in a relationship, and I know people like that who are like, oh, that's it, I'm over relationships, and then like somebody breathes on them the next day and they're like, I'm in
yeah.
So can you talk more about some of the ways that daddy issues might manifest in someone who's not like you and I, and who pushes people away, somebody who's mm-hmm. like attached to everyone?
I just don't think they end up in healthy relationships. She's not the only person I know that does that, that is always in a relationship. I feel like you need to ground yourself as a person, like know who you are, like deep down inside before getting into a relationship. Because in the end, you don't know who you are anymore. I feel like some people just like associate themselves with, I'm a relationship person, I am in this relationship, but who are you outside of the relationship? You know, do you have goals and dreams and hobbies and things that make you happy as a person? Because I'm a big believer in you being happy with yourself first before being happy with anybody else. And I just don't feel like they get to that point with with my sister. Oh, she's not on here. With my sister, she tends to gravitate toward, she changes herself to appease whomever she's with. So she's like a chameleon. Yeah, she's like a chameleon. Exactly. So like 1 minute, like one guy she dated last year, you know, she had her own sense of style. She was in school. She was very goal driven. And now she's with this guy. Now she's this new guy. And she's like wearing baggy clothes. And like, you know, now she's Harley Quinn. Like it's just, you know, two different people. So I don't think she knows who she is without associating herself with the guy that she's with.
That's funny for 3 different reasons. So I heard about the movie Eat, Pray, Love, and how she said she had been in a relationship from the time she was 15, and I don't know how old she was supposed to be at the time of the movie. But some people are like that, and they're just constantly in relationships and they don't know who they are or how to be themselves. But then another movie I was watching like every day last month, this Christmas, and the one daughter comes home and they're like, oh, well, her major is always determined by whoever she's dating. And they ask why she brought home, and he tells his major, and then they say, well, what's your major? And it's the same as his. And they're like, everyone laughs, but there's like, that is so messed up. So I think that happens a lot more often than people like to admit. But the third point I thought about when you said about the baggy clothes and the Harley Quinn is sometimes that's depression manifesting. That, you know, if there's a change in behavior and clothing and your interests are solely attached to someone else's interests, it's not just that you don't know who you are. That's some depression, and you don't know who you are, and you kind of don't know who you are with them or without them. So
yeah. There's a lot more intimate details about her in particular. I think the only time there was one time she was herself, and it was in very like dire circumstances, but she was alone. And that was the first time where I was like, oh, I have my sister back. Like, this is the person that I know, but now she's just like reverted back to that other person that I don't know, and she's all about her boyfriend, and that's, you know, that's her life. But if that's, I do agree. I think that there is some sort of depression deep down inside of her. I mean, she has confided in me that that's the case. So she's afraid to be in her own mind. So she utilizes a lot of things to kind of, you know, alcohol and drugs and things like that to kind of escape herself. So there's definitely a lot of things that she hasn't addressed that needs to be addressed.
And that's what this is all about, those unaddressed issues and how they show up in other ways. So for your sister, they're showing up in being attached to other people. But for so many other people, it's very similar to your sister, but different things. I know when I first started getting into discussing daddy issues with people, like I look at my Facebook memories and I'm like, wow, I was thinking about it even back then. But there was a special on television, Daddyless Daughters and Fatherless Sons. And one of the hosts were saying that women usually who have their dads usually look for whatever their dad couldn't give them. So if your dad is a provider, but he wasn't emotionally present, you don't really look for the man that can provide for you, because you always know that your dad can provide for you and he's probably taught you how to provide for yourself. You look for that person who can fill that emotional gap. And I had a friend who was going through that, and I had to say to her, hey, this is what's happening to you. And she was like, oh my goodness. So I don't know. I thought that was so, you know, interesting.
That's awesome.
To relate those things. And fortunately, she was open to that information, and it helped her develop in different ways. But I think that for you as a matchmaker and one having to build this dating pool, aside from that questionnaire and maybe getting to know them, do you go on the first dates with them, or what kind of activities do you set up for them? Because like you said, sometimes you don't know these people. It's kind of hard to know how they'll behave when you match them up.
I mean, I don't go on first dates with them. I might provide suggestions as to what they should do. But I kind of ease them into it. I don't necessarily like to push people into those situations. What I would really like to do is put together like a speed dating event or something like that, so people can meet each other. So, because this certification is fairly new. But I definitely want to do that with the online radio station I'm working with. So, because I think that's a good place where I can actually like guide people and maybe like push them into situations. I have gone out with girlfriends and pushed them to talk to guys, like my shy girlfriends. So I think it was 2 weeks ago I was out with a girlfriend. She's a good looking girl, and she's like, I'm really shy. So saw this guy, tall, handsome, bartender, and I was like, hey, this is my friend, so and so. What do you think? And then they started talking. They exchanged numbers, and that was it. Like, I would like to do things like that. Like I like going out. I like strangers.
I think the speed dating would be great. I know we did a lot of speed dating activities in college, like fundraisers and stuff like that. It is a lot of fun. For us, it was fun because sometimes you knew the person sitting across from you and you like fake dated for those 3 minutes or whatever when you already know this person's name and some things about them. But then sometimes it's like, where's this person? I've never seen you on campus before. So I think that speed dating is a great way to maybe build your pool as well as get to feel out your clients.
Yep, exactly.
So tonight's conversation is how to not let your daddy issues damage your dating life. What are some tips that you have for people who might be dealing with that abandonment or that rejection? Like you said, for you, and I can say for myself as well, that sometimes it's not even about the person you're dating, but even your friends not inviting you places or feeling left out and not included can give you that feeling. What are some tips that you have for people just in dating and in friendships in general on how to not let their daddy issues damage those relationships?
I think at like the biggest thing is to understand that, like, you know, you are in control of everything. Like, you're in control of your life, and whatever happens outside of you, you know, it was meant to be. Just accept it. Secondly, like living in the moment and not like living in the past. Something that I read, The Power of Now. Like, you know, you have all these negative thoughts in your head. So all these negative thoughts are saying that, you know, this person's going to hurt you. This person's going to do this to you. This person, like you did in the past, like this is going to happen again. Like, you can't allow that to happen. Just like enjoy the moment for what it is. So if your friend invites you to go somewhere, enjoy that moment. If they don't invite you, you know, it wasn't meant to be. Like, it's there. You shouldn't think everything is against you, because nothing really is. Everything, you know, people that go through struggles in life, it's always about something else. It's never about you. And if you're in a relationship, it's like, you know, you get into an argument about something little. It's never about that something little. It's always about something a lot bigger than that. So you have to think about living in the moment, not taking things for granted, and just like not thinking about the past and how it hurt you in the past. So it's really hard to get those thoughts, and it takes practice. It really does. I know a lot of people, and then, you know, of course, they talk about in the Bible, you have to forgive too. So you have to forgive the person that, like, really forgive. Don't like, you know, say, yeah, I forgive and whatever. No, like really forgive. Like, if you need to go to church and you need to pray on it, then do that, because really forgiving somebody takes a whole weight off your shoulder. You don't even think about it anymore. Like in all reality, you don't. So forgive the father that you had that like abandoned you, left you, whatever, and then just move forward. You know, you're a great and beautiful person, whoever you are, and you are living in the moment. You're enjoying your life. You're reaching your goals. You're doing things for you, and everything else will fall into place.
Great tips.
Thanks.
I kind of want to transition. I feel like because we used ourselves and your sister as an example, we approach this topic from a female-centric perspective. However, I did have a young man comment on Instagram yesterday, like, oh, well, can guys be affected by these dating and daddy issues? And I agree that they can. Have you ever had any men in your dating pool who you felt like may have brought some baggage from their life experiences into a situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. For example, like my ex-fiance, he, you know, his ex-wife cheated on him, and he took that into our relationship, like, you know, baggage. Or people that don't want to get married because their parents got divorced. I know people like that. Or I actually know somebody that, like, his dad left when he was a lot younger, and he refuses to get married. And then we talked about the whole idea that humans are like the only animals that choose to be monogamous. So we're not like naturally supposed to be that way. And then we go into this whole conversation about that. So yeah, I have met men that have been affected by not having other men in their lives. And everybody takes it a little differently, but it's mostly like, you know, you're dealing with your abandonment. What makes you feel safe? If you feel safer not being in a relationship and trying to like construe to something else that society wants you to do, then, or does not want you to do, then that's your choice. But I think as a whole, as people as a whole, we do things that might make us feel a little bit more comfortable with ourselves if we choose to do it that way. But then that kind of differentiates, like, what do you want? Do you want to be married? Then you need to let go of being safe and take a risk and be vulnerable. So it goes both ways, men and women.
I think that's interesting because, like I said, I think we often overlook that daddy issues do affect men as well.
Mm-hmm.
But just that whole idea that there are men out there who don't want to be married because their parents' relationship didn't work out. I know women like that as well, but I think I hear that narrative more so about fatherhood than about marriage, but it's equal that men don't really, they respond in ways that make them comfortable. And
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting, the examples that you gave, especially that abandonment piece. Like you said, for you and your sister, you are opposites on the spectrum of abandonment, where for men, that spectrum exists as well, but the reactions are slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
So men might choose to be polygamous or non-committal because they saw how their father leaving and that abandonment impacted their mom. Interesting.
Right. Or then you have fathers that overcompensate because they don't want to be like their fathers.
True.
But in essence, that's kind of like, I think that's positive in a way because they're striving to be something that they're not. I'm striving to be a better person. But, you know, I don't have kids, so I can't tell you how that affects children. But I've seen that in men too, like just overcompensating to be better parents to their kids.
I will also say that it's not always abandonment or absenteeism that can be a factor for men. I was actually watching a web show where this young man, he kind of ruined his relationship, a long-time relationship with a girlfriend, because he couldn't handle learning something about her. And when she was going after him and wanted his forgiveness, he didn't want it, and he was sleeping with other people and all these types of things. And now that he's ready and he wants to get back in this relationship, she's like, no, I need my time now to think on it. I don't know if I want to be with you after seeing you react that way. And he meets up with his dad, and his dad is like, she don't need to be out here working and having her own life anyway. And I'm like, what? So, you know,
I don't even want to talk about
the young man he wasn't in agreement with his dad on that. But sometimes it's not necessarily not having a dad, but having a dad that's feeding you views that are archaic that can cause a problem. Because if he listened to his dad and was like approaching this young lady on some submit, you know I made this mistake and that mistake, but I want you to come back to me, and you should come back to me. Like, that's problematic as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because my dad did come back into my life when I was 28, and we have a consistent dialogue now. But he doesn't let his wife work, but then he pushes me to go to school. So I feel like there's this disparity between us, but it's really archaic. And then I think I was going to join the military after high school. I got a really high score on the ASVAB, and he said women don't belong in the military, so I didn't go. So it's just all this weird stuff. Yeah, very, very archaic. But yeah, that's true. But then, you know, you have the uncle who's like super racist, or, you know, you have those people in your family. It's inevitable.
You know what? Two things that I just thought of from what you said. One, I think that a lot of times men raise their daughters to be the opposite of the women they want to be with. I don't know if that's, you know, just a thing that men do because they're not attracted to their daughters in that way, or
right. I hope not.
I wrote a post this summer about my family unintentionally raising me to be independent, because my grandfather and my uncle, and they had me like fixing cars and doing drywall and laying tiles and those type of stuff. And a previous relationship, I would like call my uncle if something's wrong with my car, and the guy was like, how come you never asked me? And I'm like, oh, because I know that my uncle knows about cars. I don't know about cars. So it wasn't a thing where I was intentionally pushing him out or leaving him out of my life. But it's like, you know, I know this, and this about cars. So if it's not any of these things that I can recognize on my own, I'm going to go to my source. And I'm not thinking about you as my source. And that was a problem for that person. But I think, you know, they told me that on purpose. My grandfather was like, I want you to be able to do these things so you don't have to rely on a man.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't make me an easy person to be in partnership with. And I don't think they considered that. Because my grandmother, she's not touching the car. That's what she got a husband for.
Right. Hold on, I'm looking at a book. So I don't know if you ever read Steve Harvey's book. I know he has a movie, Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. So they talk about like, the 4 P's, which is provide, protect. I forget all of them. But provide means like, your man was offended because he couldn't provide for you. So you're taking away one of his animalistic like wants to provide by not letting him fix your car. So it's a really interesting book. But I totally recommend it. I'm a huge bookworm. Like I read everything.
That's so funny. I was gifted that book when I first moved to Baltimore by one of my teaching mentors. And the person I was dating at that time, the first time I let that person come to my house, he saw the book. And I had not been reading it, and I still haven't read it. But like, if you're reading that, then we might as well break up right now. And I just kind of looked at him like, whatever. Like, I'll read whatever I want to read. If you're offended, bye. But that is interesting. I mean, I definitely understood where he was coming from. Mm-hmm. I wasn't aware that I was making him feel that way because it was just a habit for me.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I'm independent, like 100%. Me and my mom don't have like a really good relationship. My dad wasn't there. I kind of figured things out on my own. And when sometimes my husband wants to get me something, I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you getting me this? Like, it isn't, I don't need you to, I can do it myself. So, and he's like super generous. So it's really weird for me, for him to take those roles, but I kind of let him because I know that I'm supposed to. So yeah, so I totally get what you're saying.
What is your take on love languages?
I think that's a great book. I think everybody should read it. I think that everybody does have a love language and everybody feels love differently. And there's an easy quiz that you can take, I think on the 5lovelanguages.com. And it tells you like right away what your love language is. Like it takes 10 minutes or whatever. But understanding that somebody doesn't, like I feel love with physical touch. And then I want to touch all the time. But my husband, on the other hand, he likes, words of affirmation. So I have to make sure to like ask him how his day was and like tell him he's great and all this stuff. And had to be cognizant of it because if not, then he doesn't feel like I love him, So the same thing with people that are like, that like to get gifts. Like if you don't give them gifts, they don't feel loved. So they feel like there's a hole. Or if if you get somebody gifts, but their love language is acts of service, they don't care about the gifts. They just want you to like, sweep the floor in the bathroom or something, and that makes them, really excited and love you and feel the love that you're supposed to be giving them. So I think understanding somebody's love language will help you in understanding who you're with and getting you in a better position in your relationship. And you can understand like, okay, now I understand why this person was like upset with me because I didn't take out the garbage because that's their love language,
I think it's also important to know your own love language. I was having this conversation amongst friends and they were like, oh, do the love languages and this, that, and the third. I said, well, they have to know their own love language first. It doesn't matter if I know it. If they don't know their own, they can't communicate to me what it is. But I do think that it's important to know your own so that you can communicate openly with your partner, what your needs are, and they can do the same.
Right, exactly.
I recently took that quiz, maybe like a couple months ago. So it was very interesting for me. I'm like, oh, okay, that explains some things.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's tons of stuff out there. The same author wrote this book called Things You Should Know Before You Get Married, which is really interesting because it talks about like when people move in with each other for the first time, they don't talk about chores, like what is this person responsible for and what is this person not? Like, is the guy going to take out the garbage or is he not? Is not a thing. So you kind of like have to set those bounds. So in the beginning, so people understand that those are kind of the rules of the relationship, you know, like I cook dinner, he cleans, because my husband can't cook anything more than pasta. So obviously I have to cook. And then he cleans. So those are, establishing rules in the beginning of the relationship. So before you get married, or when you get married, you can set your expectations.
I think that's interesting. The same show I was telling you about with the 3 women who are married, one of them happens to be married to a doctor. And she was saying that she married a doctor because she wanted someone who could provide for her so she didn't have to do all this housework, only to end up having to do all of the housework because he's so busy being a doctor that he's not home to take out the trash and cut the grass. And she was raking leaves or something like last week on the show. And I thought that was awesome that she was open enough to say that, you know, it was one thing to marry for money and status, thinking that you would have it easy, but they don't have a mansion with maids and service people. Like, they do have a gardener, and sometimes people come cut the grass for her, but more times than not, she's responsible for all of the housework because he's responsible for being the provider for everything. I was like, wow, did that work out in her favor?
I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes, you know, I don't think you ever really realize what you get yourself into until you're into it. Like any relationship. I think I wrote in my post today, I'm a huge advocate. Like I'm Puerto Rican, so my family is usually late, right? But I like to be on time. I think it's because I was raised in the military, so I like to be on time. But my husband, on the other hand, he's never on time. Drives me nuts. But in the beginning, when we were dating, he would always be on time. And I was like, oh, this is great. He's amazing. This is amazing. Whatever. He's got a nice apartment, good job, whatever. So then I think we went to dinner with his mom or something. And then she's like, oh yeah, Gio's always late. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's always on time. And then little by little, he started being late to everything. And it's 5 years later, so I just accept it for what it is. But
that's funny. I did read that earlier, and I thought that was hilarious. I was actually reading it on the phone with my mom, but my mom has something she likes to call the representative. So so that's pretty much, you were dating the representative at that time. Yeah. Do you suggest people bring their representative to the first date, or do you suggest that they are themselves and that person gets to know them so they're not setting themselves up for disappointment later down the line?
Well, I had a good friend of mine tell me one time, like, you let out a little crazy at a time. You know, you can't go all in and be like this drunken mess and like say, hey, you know, I like to drink, I like to party, you know. But like, you know, put your best foot forward, just like in a job interview, you know, you always put your best foot forward. And I would totally recommend that, just so that you can get to know each other, ease yourself in, and just like let out a little crazy at a time. Like, you know, you really like Star Wars, but your date doesn't really know that you dress up as Chewbacca to go to the movies, you know? So you kind of like, I really like Star Wars. And the next thing you know, I was like, hey, this event's coming. I need to warn you. I like to dress up. And then, you know, just ease them into it, as opposed to like, hey, I like to dress up like Chewbacca on the weekends, you know. So it's just a little bit at a time. And then, you know, plus like, you know, it's kind of like saying, do you fart on the first date, you know? I would hope people don't. But I've heard stories that people have done that, but that's besides the point. But you don't do that kind of stuff on the first date, or like pick your nose or whatever. That's kind of something you kind of ease yourself into, or like, you know, go into the bathroom while your significant other's using the bathroom. Like, that's stuff you do later on in life, because like you're busy, there's kids, you don't have time for them to finish, whatever. So you just go in and it's like, you know what, I'm just grabbing a towel and like leave, like, because you don't care. But you don't do that on the first date, you know?
Sure.
Same thing. It's like kind of the same idea. Like, you don't do everything at once. You don't tell them that you want to get married and have, you know, white horses bring you in a carriage to your wedding and things like that on your first date.
Oh, see, you know what? Now I see all these times I kept telling people I wanted to kids was a turnoff.
You
gotta save that for like date 5.
Yeah, just ease into it. You know, it's like guys are scared. They're scared. They're like, first they're scared to ask you out. Then they're scared to go they get nervous on the date. I mean, girls get nervous on the date too. And then third, they're like, okay, what I need to impress this girl. I need to dress good. I need to, put cologne on. Well, most dates do. I have some bad stories, but, make a good impression. And you want to put your best foot forward because you want the girl to like you. Because it's really, at the end of the day, it's kind of like traditionally it's in our court if we choose to, but sometimes we get really insecure and then we get stalkerish, and that's a whole nother story.
Different story for a different day. So we're winding down here. We got about 8 minutes left. One last question, and then I'll let you say any final thoughts you want to wrap up. What are some tips that you would give to men to not bring their insecurities or their dating, their daddy issues into the dating arena, just like the tips you shared for women earlier?
I think the tips are very similar. Work on yourself. Get to know who you are, be happy with yourself, and know what you want to bring into the relationship. Something else I always say is that you have to know what you want before you go into it, or you have to act like the person you want to be before you go into it. So if you're sleeping around and hooking up with girls and whatever, then a girl's not going to respect you because they're going to think they're just another notch on her belt. So work on yourself, figure out what you want to do. I highly suggest if you want to read Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man, I would, because they do talk about like what men's needs are. Maybe you can understand yourself a little bit better. I found it says provide, profess, and protect. So you want to provide, so you want to have a good job. You feel comfortable because you can financially provide for your family. 2, you profess your love. Like, do you really like this person? If you don't really like the person, please don't lead them on. We don't like it. It drives women crazy. And then we do crazy things like put lipstick on your car, and you don't want that. So just be honest. And then protect, like you want to protect your house, your family. You want to protect your woman. Like if, some guy does something to her, you want to protect her. And, that's that, like, if you want to go back into like animalistic, and like our ways as humans, as an animal, then instinct, thank you. Then those are the kinds of things you need to focus on, and how to control those things, and what you really want out of the relationship. If you want to go into a relationship, if you want to hook up and sleep around, just be honest, but work on yourself first. I just drives me crazy. Because if you're just sleeping with somebody, just tell them.
I agree.
That's it. I don't have a problem with it.
I think that's grossly underestimated how many times people would just agree if you just told the truth up front.
Mm-hmm.
Or even if your thoughts change, because sometimes people are telling the truth up front, but then they're like, oh, okay, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. I like you, but not how I thought I liked you before. Whatever the case may be, I think that just being honest about how you feel is important.
And tell us if we have stuff in our teeth. Like, I would rather you tell me than you walk around with something in my teeth. It's interesting. So I did a show with one of my clients, and one of the guys at the show, he was in his 80s, like he's up there, like late 70s, early 80s or whatever. And I had something on my face, and he's like, he wipes it off, and he's like, my wife would get so mad at me if I'd never told her. And I thought I was like, your wife trained you very well. And I thought that was something really interesting, because he's been married for 50 years or something like that, but he knew, like, instinctually that that's what his wife would want him to do.
Sometimes wives just elevate their husbands. Imagine if he never had that wife and he would have just let you sit there on that show with that stuff on your face.
Yep. He's a good man. But he's taken.
So, are there any final thoughts you want to leave us with? When can we find Val's Bits and Bites on Love? Where can we access your podcast, and how can people keep in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my blog and my podcast are both posted on valsbites.com, but you can also find me on SoundCloud and iTunes. and Stitcher. And we do the podcast every Tuesday, and I try to post a blog every Thursday, but Emily says that you just do what you can, right? So, so I try. And then next month, I will be back on online radio with Throwback Vibes. I don't have an exact date yet. I'm still waiting. But as soon as I do have a date, I'll let you all know, and we'll be back. And I'll be back doing my segment. And there's a guy on our show telling Kevin, what love is really about, and we get into arguments. It's a lot of fun, and that's coming up next month as well. I don't have any courses. I am working on one. I'm working on the 30-day online dating guide, and then I'm also working on an ebook of my best blogs on dating. So those things are in the work as soon as I can find somebody to do it for me, or an extra 24 hours in a day. So
I can't believe I did not ask you about online dating. I probably didn't, because I personally don't choose to partake in online dating. Mm-hmm. I did see something pretty cool, virtual reality dating, where they don't see each other. They get hooked up to the virtual reality goggles. And
an avatar. No, but I know people date with avatars, like Dungeons and Dragons kind of.
Not even. Okay, so if you're familiar with virtual reality goggles, like the VR goggles, I know cell phone providers have had them recently, but they make each person stand on opposite sides of a wall and put the goggles on, and they have the body sensors taped all over their bodies, and they're having a virtual reality experience together. So they can see what the person looks like based on their avatar in the game through the goggles, but they put them in scenarios where they kind of got to depend on one another. And the guy was the girl freaked out. They were zombies. So they were all right, let's get back to back. Let's get back to back. And then he turned into a zombie, and she freaked out and ran the opposite way. So it was really cool. And I was like, I would do that as a first date, where,
that's awesome.
We got to know each other and got to see how this person would react in certain situations. Could they trust them? It made them slow dance. It was kind of awkward, but by that point of the game, they were more comfortable with one another. Mm-hmm. And then they asked each other questions while they were playing the game, like, where are you from? What's your background? What do you do? Stuff like that.
That's pretty cool. I'm going to write that down.
I thought that was really cool. I can to it. It's only on Facebook, though. I was looking for it on YouTube to be able to send a clip to someone else. But I thought it was really cool. And then they got to decide whether they wanted to do a second date or not afterwards.
That's really cool. I met my husband on Match.com. So I know two other couples have gotten married off of Match. As a matter of fact, one of them is a good guy friend of mine. I kept seeing him on my matches. So I was like, Hector, we're not going to date. It's but I kept seeing him. It was hilarious. But
one of my high school teachers got married from someone she met on eHarmony.
Yeah, eHarmony didn't work for me, but I want to talk to somebody that, if somebody's out there, if you have an eHarmony story, a positive one, let me know. Because when I was on there, it was either they were too young, a 22-year-old, and I'm 34. When I was dating, I was 28, 29. Or in their 40s, and guys in their 40s kind of creep me out a little bit, or at that time, because they're very sexually aggressive, and I didn't like that. So if you have a success story, please let me know. I would love to hear it, because I haven't heard one from eHarmony. I've heard one from Tinder, Plenty of Fish, and Match, of course.
Okay. Well, like you said, Val said, if you have any successful stories from eHarmony, please share them with her. You can find her at Val's Bites, VALSBYTES, on all social media. And Val, tell them, are you having any events coming up in the Orlando area? Where can people find you? If you don't have any, maybe you should put them in the works. But definitely find her on social media. Listen to Val Love Bits and Bites podcast, SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher. Mm-hmm. And look out for her release on online radio coming soon.
Yep, I will.
Anything else you want to share, Val, before we get out of here?
No, that everybody have a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year.
All right. Thanks, Val. Have a great evening. Thanking with us this evening.
Thank you for having me. Bye.